Okay, I'll let you go to it.
Awesome, wonderful. So, well, welcome. First off, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, really, really good. Yeah, you guys kind of staying out of trouble, staying safe as much as you can.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks so much for sending the videos. We can kind of get straight into it. Do you have any original initial questions before we get started?
Well, I want to just try to have a schedule maybe for her about how much she should be playing. Like, I don't know, like she varies. How much fitness, how much she should be training. We try to do not as many tournaments, only like one tournament a month, and try to do training and practice matches because it's just too expensive to be traveling all over the place.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I mean, you now with UTR and the ability to play, different people in your own local areas, there's no need to go travel all over the place. There's 100% agree. So, but in general, it depends a little bit on what you need to work on. If you need to work on the physical side the most, you want to spend more time on the physical side. If you feel like you got to work more technically or tactically, then you got to spend a bit more time on the tennis court side of things. So that's something for you guys to sort of map out and put your sort of goals together as to in the next 6 months, where do you feel like are your biggest areas of focus or biggest areas that you got to prioritize your time with? And that's sort of how you do it. I don't like saying, hey, everyone at your age or your stage of your level should be doing, 60% tennis, 40% physical. Some of the athletes I work with are 70% on the court, 30% off. Others are 40% on the court, 60% off. So it just depends a bit on what areas they need to work on.
Okay.
So, I mean, as we go through, we can talk through that a little bit more as well. So I'm going to share my screen so you guys can kind of see, and I'm going to send you a copy of this with voice notes as well. So you'll have this as after. So if something's, so here we'll start with the serve first. So normally when we look at it, everything, the start is all, mainly stylistic and it all looks good. So what we want to get to is when we get to release, there's a couple things here that you'd like to work in on. You've got a very straight on release, which just limits your ability to rotate your hips very well at this point. So one suggestion is instead of releasing pretty straight towards the net like you are, is slightly of releasing more towards the right net post where that green line is, because that's going to give you the better ability to rotate the hips a little bit. So that's just a starting point, because what you've got a really good serve. You can see you're a good athlete. It's just you open up very quickly on your serve. You over rotate very quickly, and that puts a lot of extra strain and pressure on your arm, which we want to try to work on adjusting over the next few months. So does that make sense what I'm saying with the arm release? You see how it's releasing sort of straight towards
you
the
want
net?
more with the net post, right? Like 45.
Yeah, exactly. More on the 45-degree angle, kind of where that green line is. So you want to have the arm more in line there. So that's the one thing on the release. Then we get here into loading, and there's a couple things to kind of notice here that do need some adjustment, and it's a good opportunity for improvement. Your shoulder plane, that yellow line on the 45-degree angle or so, is pretty good. Shoulders look good there. But notice how the hips don't match up with that line at all. The hips are straight across, so they're straight there. You ideally want the back hip to drop down, and you want approximately a similar angle for the hips and the shoulders. So do you kind of see that?
Yes. So to practice that, she could just do the thing where you're like kind of picking up something, like you're rotating your hips back. You've done it before, I think.
Exactly. So the ball pickups from behind the heel are great. Single leg serving is another one.
Okay.
If you go to Kovacs Academy and go to the blog and put in single leg serving or back leg serving, there's a couple good articles there with a bunch of exercises and videos to do. So that's a really good option. Notice how the back knee collapses. You see how it sort of falls inwards there where that blue angle is?
Mm-hmm.
That's telling us that there's probably a weakness in her right hip right now. She doesn't have as much strength and stability in that right hip as you probably need. Have you had that looked at? Do you work? Has anyone said anything like that the right hip strength and stability may need a bit of work?
Not really. No.
Okay. So that's, do you see what I'm saying though? You see how that right hip, that right knee collapses, it sort of buckles a bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually a result of the right hip just not being as stable as we want it to be.
Okay. She does have a pinpoint, which is okay, right?
Yeah, totally fine. It's great. So nothing at all wrong with the motion. It's just your angles are a bit off right now and you're not loading in the right direction. So because you haven't loaded back and down with a lower body, you've sort of shifted your weight forward pretty early and your hips now are level, which they should be sort of back and down a bit. Okay. You'll see on the next stage, when we get to stage 4, if you have a look here, this is the cocking stage. You're starting to open up very early. So you've got really good range of motion in the upper body. So your racket tip is pointing down to your right heel, which is what we want. That's what all good servers do. But notice the left arm and the left elbow. See on the left screen, see how you can see that completely? Mm-hmm. At this point, from this camera angle, the back angle, I shouldn't be able to see your front leg at all. So your left leg should be immediately behind the right leg. So you should be completely side on. And I shouldn't see any part of your left arm at all. That left arm should be sort of in your belly button, kind of on the side here. So you're just really opening up very early. So what that results in is that results in your abs and your lower back having to work harder than they should, and then your arm doing more than it should. Do you ever get fatigued in long matches with your arm, or does your arm feel pretty good in long matches?
No, it normally feels pretty good.
Okay, well that's good. That's a good sign. It's just you're overutilizing your arm a little bit. So does that make sense what I'm saying though? That can you see kind of how it's opening up a little bit early?
Yeah. If she keeps her left hand up,
mm-hmm.
That'll
help a bit, but it won't avoid her opening up, because what'll happen is the moment it comes down, she'll still rotate. So you can definitely keep it up a little bit longer. There's no harm in that. It's just that's not the main issue right now, because she's pretty tall still. See how she's very erect, very tall, which is what we want. So that all looks good. It's just the rotation is the challenge.
Okay.
So here we get to contact. So you can kind of see here at contact, you're very much, your shoulders and your hips are pointing straight at the net. So you've got good extension. So you're getting high, you're making good high ball contact, but you're like this at contact. You're facing the net. Ideally, you want to be a bit more side on at that point. Okay. So that's the area of improvement. You don't fix that though at contact. So we're at stage 6 right now. Really where it is you've got to go back to stage 3, which is here. That's going to be the position that you want to make your adjustment at. So you make your adjustment here, get those hips to turn, get them lower down. Then you stay more side on here. So I don't see that left arm at all. Then this still is, we want to stay side on. We don't want those legs to separate. That's a sign that you're opening up. If you see a big gap right there. And then contact will then take care of itself. So does that kind of make some sense?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So it's a pretty minor aspect because your serve's very good. You've got a lot of really good components. It's because this is zapping you of some power, and it's also making it that it's difficult for you to hit a kick serve. I would guess based on this, you'll probably slice your second, and you're not hitting a kick serve. And this is the reason you can't hit a kick serve if you open up like this. It's impossible.
Okay, so second serve, would it be better for her to hit a slice or a kick? Because with the kick, it takes more power, which obviously she's maybe not as strong.
No. If she adjusts her motion, she'll have a great kick serve. There's no reason not to be able to hit a kick serve if she stays side on here, side on here, side on here. If she opens up through here, then you have to go with the slice serve. It's your only real option. So that's a decision you guys have to kind of talk through and say, do I want to really max out my serve and stay side on and work on these few things here? Or am I going to sort of work with what I've got and just slice that serve in? So that's a discussion for you guys kind of to make a determination on. Okay. And then decel, pretty good. yeah, it's hard to tell because it's indoors and the lighting wasn't great in the frame rate, so you don't see the full long axis rotation. But the arm's pretty straight there. The one suggestion I would make is try not to have the arm so straight. Try to have a higher elbow finish, meaning that your elbow is higher than your wrist. So right now, your elbow's in line with your wrist pretty much, or actually your arm's even higher than your elbow. You want to try to have a higher elbow finish. So all the great servers do that. And again, it's hard to do when you're so open like you are. So go back to making that side-on adjustment.
So what will she do to fix that? Would she go back to her hips? That would help?
Yeah, so you really go and fix the first parts. I wouldn't address this right now because this is late in the motion. You want to get the other pieces figured out and fixed first, and then a lot of the time this will turn on its own. You'll fix this on its own because you're in the right position and the body does it naturally. So all the great servers haven't really been taught this position. They just get into it because everything else is lined up right. So you don't want to teach an outcome. You want to teach what causes the outcome, and you want to fix what causes the outcome.
Okay.
This is an outcome. So that's why we address this after everything else is fixed. And then if there's an issue there, like it still hasn't made the adjustment, then there's a couple of things that we can talk through, really easy ones that you really just want to finish with a high elbow. You want to serve from the service line into the next service box. So you're trying to bounce the serve down and up, and that'll give you that feeling of finishing like that. Okay. So any questions on the serve?
Mm-mm.
Great. So I think that'll give you some starting. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to send you these links with me voicing it over as well. And I'll send you the recording of today as well. So you have that. So you've got a couple things you can talk through. So let's take a look at the backhand here. So on the backhand standpoint, everything looks pretty good here. I mean, is your backhand your better stroke?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it looks like it, just based on sort of what I'm seeing here. So everything looks fine in the start. So this is what loading. So we're looking at loading here. You do a good job of loading into that left glute and that left hip, which is important. A lot of players don't do this. Again, this is a relatively easy ball. You're stepping into it. So you've got a square stance or more of a close stance footwork pattern. So curious if you hit it the same way when you have to be semi-open or more open on a wide ball. But this is a really good thing to look at. One question for you is you've got a very bent arm. So notice how both arms are bent. You've got a pretty bent arm both on the left, which you can see there, and then the right as well. So one suggestion to get a little more pace on the backhand is you can straighten out that right arm. So don't have as much of a bend in the elbow. See that 126 degrees or so? That's just an estimate. But, if you can get that closer to 90, so about 100, 105 degrees would be a better option. So that arm, when you're taking it back like this, instead of having it bent like this, it's actually straighter. Reason that's valuable is that allows your upper body and your lower body to work together and rotate as one unit. Right now, your hips have rotated pretty well, but then your arms do a different motion. So you really want your arms and your hips to rotate together. So think about, like, say, a Djokovic or a Sharapova or one of these that have really strong backhands. They have their entire body works as a unit. So if we get here, this is the lock-in position. So this is the butt of the racket is pointing at the ball at this point. Everything looks great here. Honestly, you've done a really good job here. Your arm starts to straighten. Could even be a bit straighter here, the right arm. But everything looks great. You're loading well. Your back knee's starting to drop. So it means you're really using your back leg and your back leg's coming through. So everything looks good there. The only question for you is when balls come harder or when you have to move more is that wrist position. You just got to be careful that you don't drop your wrist too quickly. You want to get your legs doing the work rather than your wrist dropping the racket face below. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
On this one, you look really good, but you see that you may have a tendency on harder balls, on wider balls, to rely on your upper body and your wrist to do more work than it should. And that usually happens when your legs don't get below the ball. But in this situation, your legs are below the ball, so everything's looking really good. Okay, this is acceleration. Everything looks great here. Again, you know, you're in a good spot. Everything's going through the right plane, the right path. The back legs dropped. So a lot of good stuff happening here. And then at contact, you know, our angles in our lower body are about as good as you can draw up. So that's great. There is spacing there. It's a big factor on good backhands, is having good spacing between the back elbow and, so for you, the left elbow and the left hip, making sure there's good space there. If you're too close, you can't generate the pace. If you're too wide, you can't generate the pace either. So you got to find that sweet spot. So that's figuring out your spacing, your footwork, and making sure your contact points are good. But everything looks really good there. Do you kind of see any questions on any of this?
When you said about her wrist dropping,
yeah,
is it bad to have them angled at that? Should she have her wrist not bent as much, or is bent okay?
So you don't want the wrist to drop. So that's called ulnar deviation, when the wrist does that excessively. You don't want that to get the racket down. What you want to do is you want to drop your hips, drop your shoulders to get as low as you can, so your wrist doesn't have to do the exaggerated work. If you do too much of the wrist, over time, you're going to get wrist pain. You're going to get some of those issues that we see a lot at the higher levels where they overuse the wrist.
Okay.
And then extension, very straight extension, which is great. So you can see you've got a great left arm there. It's very straight, really, really good. Legs have come through. Back leg is rotated. So the back hip, the left hip is rotated. So you've really released good energy there. And then the only thing on the finish is don't feel bad about letting that left foot come all the way through. It looks like you did a great job here of getting the left hip through, but then you didn't fully let it come through. See how that foot's still back behind you? Feel free to let that hip come around a bit. As long as you've got really good extension here, then you can let that hip come through as much as you like. If you don't have good extension here, then you may spin off it and come out of it too early, which is not what we want. So just be careful. If you do start letting the hip come around, which is what you want, that'll get you some more power. You just want to be careful that you don't lose that good extension though.
Okay, now one of the problems she does have on backhands is the lower ball.
Yep.
But that's a matter of her getting her legs beneath the ball and hitting the shot, right?
Exactly, 100%. So like in this position here, that knee could be a bit lower. That front hip could be a little bit lower. So she can really get below the ball even more. So if the ball's lower, the ball that isn't low there, so she doesn't have to, but in that scenario, you would get that a bit lower.
Okay.
Good. Okay, so you okay to go to the forehand?
Yep.
Perfect. So here on the forehand, you can see there's a couple more things to work on. The backhand looks really solid. So on the forehand, let's take a look. So here we get to load. So there's a few things here where you could load into that right hip a little bit better. So rotate into that hip a bit more. The reason you're not, though, is because you've released your hands very early. So the left arm has come off the racket pretty early, and you haven't really got a great uniturn where the shoulders and the hips go together as far as possible. So that would be something you'd want to play with a bit, is trying to keep the left arm on the racket just a little bit longer. And the purpose of that is to rotate your hips and shoulders more. And so what that'll allow you to do is load up more, store more energy longer, and that'll give you more pace on the forehand and more ability to, you know, get a faster paced ball there. So does that concept make some sense?
Yeah. So when she's taking it back with both her hands, I know you talked about making sure it stays on one side of the plane or not. It doesn't. At what point would how far should go back?
Yeah, so normally I'll use that chest bone, the sternum, as your guide. So try to have the left arm on the racket all the way to when your left arm gets to your chest bone. Once it gets there, then you can start releasing. You don't want to release it earlier than that, though. If you release it earlier than that, you get this separation early, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. The other thing is also notice how low the left arm is. you really want to try to keep that left arm sort of at shoulder height or a little closer to shoulder height, not at hip height. Right now, your wrist is at hip height.
Okay.
So, but everything else, you've got a bent elbow on both sides. You've bent elbow on the forehand, which is just a style thing. It's not good or bad. It's just a style aspect of it. So, from that standpoint, you're laid back pretty good. So you've got good lag there. You just want to be careful here. Notice how close your elbow is to your side. You want a bit more spacing there. You just want to have that elbow out. You want at least 2 tennis balls, sometimes even 3 tennis balls width from your hip. Right now, your elbow is right in your hip. So it's really, really close. So you'll be able to spin the ball, but you're going to be a little limited in how much pace you can hit with a forehand like this. So is that kind of how you play? Do you ever spin your forehand?
No, not really.
Yeah.
She likes to hit the ball. She can. I mean, she does spin it, but she tries to. She's not a looper.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. It's just from a standpoint of when you hit it, is it very flat or is it spinny when you hit it? How do you?
It is spinning when she hits it. It's not flat. Yeah, more spin than her backhand.
Yeah, that's kind of, you can see because of that position. So, and again, it's not a bad thing. It's just knowing that because of where your swing path is, you're going to have a bit more spin on the ball, which again is something that just from a strategy standpoint is that if that's the goal, then we're okay with it. But if you want to flatten it out sometimes more and get a little bit more flat kind of ball on it, then you've got to have some adjustment there.
Yeah, she does want to flatten it out more. So would we also fool around with her, maybe straightening the arm in the right hand too, maybe sometimes to see how that feels?
Yeah, I mean, that's a bigger change though, because that's like a real stroke adjustment. If you start going straight arm on the right compared to bent arm like she is, that's going to feel very different. So I don't know if you've practiced that at all or if you've tried that in the past. But if this shot feels pretty good, I wouldn't make that adjustment because that's a style issue. Especially if you can catch up with the ball pretty well, which you do. You do a good job of catching up with it. Because the contact point's out in front. I mean, you've got pretty good contact point location. The one challenge is you're very bent at contact. So the reason you're bent is because your elbow's close to you. And then it stays bent all the way through contact. And then your next frame, you see you don't really get extension. See how quickly you break off? Remember the backhand, how well you extended? Your extension was straight. On your backhand, it was your left arm was fully extended. Whereas on the forehand, you want your right arm to be fully extended before it breaks. You never really get fully extended. You go contact and then straight, you break it off. So see where you are at contact, you're still bent. You never really got fully extended. You never got extended. It just completely broke off. So that's going to be one thing you want to try to practice a bit is fully extend on the forehand as much as possible. And to do that, you may flatten it out a little bit, which is okay. That's kind of what you want as well. But to get more spin with that newer technique, you want to make sure you use your legs more. Your legs below the ball, go lower to high, work through that. Yeah, and then you can see here, how quickly you break off. So that's the biggest thing is just avoid the breaking off so early and try to work on your extension.
But I think she's doing that maybe to get more spin, which is not what she wants to do, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's reasons that you do it. You're uncertain with your contact point is why you're doing it. Your contact point's out in front, but your arm's bent, so you don't have the stability there. If you had a better, straighter extension, you would feel more stable through your contact zone. Also think about hitting 3 balls at once. So it's a cue I always use and it works really well, is every time you hit a tennis ball, think there's a ball before it and think there's a ball after it. And you have to hit through all 3 balls because that'll make sure your contact point, you get to your contact point a little sooner and you hold the contact point a little bit longer. Does that make some sense?
Yep.
So, no, really, really good. I mean, we talked about a lot of stuff to work on, but overall, the strokes look great. I mean, they look really, really good. It's just those things, if you're looking to add that extra bit of pop, the extra consistency, it'll really help. And, you know, so do you have any questions on either the forehand or the backhand?
No, I think that's it. So basically, her hips need to be working more to get herself loaded more.
Correct. If you were a pro, we'd probably be saying the same thing. Hey, you can work your hips more. Doesn't matter how good your hips work now, they can work better. So you want to get lower, you want to rotate more, you want to get into, say, here, this position better. This is the position that you can do better at. You can turn into them, load into them. So get that right hip rotated clockwise a little bit more. And that's going to give you that extra pop on the ball, which you're going to really like. And it's going to be easy. It's going to be easy power.
So we've been working with her on trying to get higher clearance.
Yep.
Would hitting a flatter ball be bad? Because if she's hitting a flatter one, the clearance wouldn't be as high, right?
Correct. But don't think you're going to hit that much flatter. You want to have better extension, but you want to still load your legs well and go low to high. So you're still going to get spin, maybe not as much, but the ball's going to travel through the air quicker, but you're still going to have a lot of spin. So don't think it's going to be a flat bullet. You still want to have good neck clearance. You still want to have 3 to 5 feet of neck clearance on your forehands. You don't want 7 to 10 though. So that's
same with the backhand. Well, obviously her backhand, you know, it is interesting. The forehand's going to have more spin. The backhand's going to be flatter, right? That's the way it's going to be. So the backhand is going to have less height. I mean, less clearance.
Correct. And that's just her style as well. Yeah. Her style of play is she's going to drive a flatter backhand. She's going to have a little more shape on the forehand, which is hard to play against.
Yeah.
If you have
the backhand for the shorter one, the shorter ball is a killer because she tries to take that down the line. And it all depends on the height of the ball. If the ball's too low, she's really got to try to get more shape. And if it's higher, she can try to flatten it out.
Exactly. So you got to get your legs below it. Next time you go practice that shorter backhand, you know, make sure that your left knee starts to bleed. If your left knee is not bleeding, it means you haven't got you below the ball well enough. Seriously. On a hard court, if you don't bleed up a little bit on your left knee, if you hit 50 short backhands like that where you got to get up in the court, you better start bleeding a little bit because that'll tell you that you're getting your knee low enough.
Okay. Well, that is good. I don't have any questions. Do you have any questions? Look in the camera. If there's
yeah, about my backhand volley, should I be using 2 hands or 1?
So there's not a right or wrong on that. Most of the better volleyers are going to use 1 because it gives them more distance to cover. They can cover more distance. But what do you prefer to do?
2 hands, but sometimes when they're like hip level, I drop it almost like a backhand, and I don't keep it like the racket head up.
So the biggest thing is you want to still, if you're going to hit a traditional volley, not a drive volley, not a swing volley, but a traditional volley, just make sure you keep the racket above your wrist the entire time. You know, so let me grab a racket here. So if you're a right-hander, you're going to have your racket above your wrist always. Don't let it get like this. That's where you get into a lot of problems. So keep it there. And then try not to swing. So meaning that you just take a step forward. Your right leg should always try to come forward. It's the easier option. And then you want to make sure your contact point's out in front without really swinging. And if you do that, you can hit just as good a backhand volley with 2 hands as with 1. So at your stage, if you're comfortable hitting a 2, I'd probably still go with it, but make sure you work on your technique of the 2.
Okay.
Mark, do you think so? So with her, she has a pure drive team and she has some weight on it, but we try to sometimes think about switching rackets to a heavier racket. It's not really important, is it? Because if it's too heavy, she won't get it around, right? But
yeah, so there's a lot of factors with rackets. So from a technology standpoint, the lighter the racket you have, normally the smaller the grip you're going to have as well. And that's going to provide value for your ground strokes more than anything else because you can swing faster. You can have a quicker racket head speed through the air. But the negative to that is it's going to impact your volleys a little bit. You're not going to have as much control on your volleys. And normally you're not going to have as much control on your serve either. So keep that in mind. That's the balancing act. So If you like the racket you've got, you may not want to make an adjustment. You may just want to add a little more weight to it.
Okay.
Was there a racket you were thinking or you've been trialing that you're interested in?
Oh God, she tried some. What were those rackets? She tried some Technofiber rackets, and she's tried different rackets.
But yeah, the Technofibers, most of them are they're heavier and stiffer than the Pure Drive. So how did you find that? Because that's a good comparison. That's a different type of racket.
You liked the one, didn't you? There was one of them she liked. But the thing was, when she went back to her old racket, the old one felt better. She didn't maybe give it enough time. So we just kind of maybe lowered her tension on her Babolat one to give her a little more spin.
Yeah, I mean, if you lower the tension, you'll get more pace and more spin on it normally. And then, you may want to look at the grip as well. You may, if you want to slightly make the grip smaller possible. How's the grip feel?
Well, I had it smaller, but she's built it up.
Okay. Well, and again, that'll help your backhand probably, but it'll make the forehand a little less acceleration. You won't get as much acceleration through on the forehand.
With the smaller grip, right? Now, when you say smaller, you mean so you can hold it loosely and there's a finger. And you don't want it so that you can't, like there's too much space, right?
Yeah, exactly. You want to make it, smaller grip allows for the racket to just come through a little bit faster. You can swing faster with a smaller grip.
Okay. Okay.
But you lose control on the volleys. That's the trade-off.
Yeah. Okay. What else? So, we should just work a lot with medicine balls.
Yeah, as much as you can. That'll help you tremendously.
I think you said that you used bungee cord.
Yeah, bungee cords, resistance bands, medicine balls. Those are the three things that you'll work this position that we're looking at right here. This is the rotation into the hip, is the real important one. So for this example, you would actually have the bungee cord kind of where the feeder is right now, not that far away, but in that direction. And then she would just be doing shadow swings against the resistance. So she's got to turn into that position.
So he's going to have the bungee cord all the way over there?
No, it doesn't have to be that far, but kind of in line with it. He could be on the service line on this side of the court, but kind of where he's standing there, that kind of line.
Do you have like videos of those? Of how you do?
Yeah, I can send you a couple of those.
That would be great. Okay. What else? Anything else? Nope. That's it.
Awesome. When are you guys going to practice again?
Tomorrow.
Okay, awesome. Maybe work on a couple of those and send me a couple quick text me on your phone or something. Just what you're working on, how it's looking, and we can make maybe a couple comments on to see how that's going.
Okay. That's great. Put that in.
Awesome. Well, hey, it was great catching up with you, and you look forward to seeing and see how these are going. But I'll send you a copy of this, and I'll also send you my notes as well that I've voiced over on the file. So you'll get a couple of videos from me in a little bit.
Great.
Awesome.
And so would you say she needs to work more physically than on the court? More.
I mean, I'm not sure how her consistency is. So that's where the court work becomes really valuable. But I would say right now, physical would definitely help. There's definitely a few things physically that would really make a difference. So especially, you're not going to probably play a tournament for the next month or so. So it probably makes sense to really overemphasize the physical right now.
Mm-hmm.
And make any adjustments technically you're planning on making in the next week or so. So you have a good month to really feel comfortable with them.
Okay. That's great. Yep.
Wonderful. Well, hey, great catching up, and I'll shoot you an email with some of this stuff in a few minutes, okay?
Yes, thank you. Really, a lot of help.
So much.
Yeah, of course. No problem at all. It'll be great to see the progress as well.
Okay.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.